This Notebook LM video explores the first major identity crisis of the early Christian movement. As Gentile converts joined in large numbers, conflict arose with Jewish Christians over whether Mosaic law was required for salvation. Leaders including Peter, Paul, Barnabas, and James gathered in Jerusalem to debate the issue.
Okay, so picture this. A brand new startup suddenly goes viral. I mean, totally blows up. But the new users are different. They're pulling the company in completely opposite directions. Well, that's pretty much exactly what was happening to the early Christian movement just a couple of decades after it started. They were facing this massive identity crisis that was threatening to just tear the whole thing apart. So how did this startup of a faith handle its very first huge pivot? Let's dive in. So really, what does happen when a movement goes viral? I mean, for the first Christians, this wasn't some abstract business problem. It wasn't just about scaling up. No, this was about defining their entire identity. See, the explosive growth was coming from non-Jews, the Gentiles, and this created this huge fundamental conflict over who they were and what they actually believed. It forced a question on them that they absolutely could not ignore. And you can really see the two camps forming right here. On one side, you had the Jewish Christians, and for them, following Jesus was the natural fulfillment of Judaism. It all fit together. But that meant new converts had to observe the entire Mosaic law, and that especially meant circumcision, if they wanted to be considered part of the community. Then, on the other side, you had folks like the Apostle Paul, championing the Gentile converts. They were arguing that no, faith in Jesus is a totally new path. Faith alone is enough for salvation, and it's open to everyone, everywhere, without needing to follow ancient Jewish laws and rituals. Yeah, and make no mistake, this was not some friendly little debate over minor details. This was a full-blown identity crisis. The whole movement was standing at a crossroads, and the path they chose right then and there would decide everything. Would they stay a small sect within Judaism, or would they become something completely new, something like a global religion? And listen to this quote from the book of Acts. It just shows you how incredibly high the stakes were. Unless you are circumcised, you cannot be saved. Wow, this wasn't about cultural preferences or fitting in. This was about salvation. The stakes literally could not have been higher. You have one side telling a massive, growing group of new believers that their faith by itself was basically worthless without this one ritual. So you might be asking, why all the focus on this one thing? Well, it's because circumcision was not just some minor rule. For centuries, it was seen as the everlasting sign of the covenant God made with Abraham. It was the bedrock, the absolute foundation of Jewish identity. So to suggest it wasn't necessary anymore, for many that was just unthinkable. It felt like they were being asked to abandon the very foundation of their entire faith. Okay, so the movement is at a breaking point. Things are about to fall apart. The leaders knew they had to do something. So what did they do? They called a meeting, a summit, right in Jerusalem, to settle this thing once and for all. This became the first great debate in the church's history, the Council of Jerusalem. And get this all went down around the year 50 AD. Just stop and think about that for a second. We're talking only 15, maybe 25 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. This movement was still a baby, you know? It was in its infancy. And this council, this was its first huge test. And I mean, the room was a who's who of the early church. You had Peter, right? The apostle who'd already witnessed with his own eyes the Holy Spirit being given to Gentiles who weren't circumcised. You had Paul and Barnabas, the guys on the front lines, leading the mission and bringing in thousands of these Gentile converts. And then presiding over the whole thing, you had James, the brother of Jesus himself, the respected leader of the main church back in Jerusalem. All the heavy hitters were there. So, how did they actually do it? What did this process even look like? Well, you could think of it like the first major board meeting, and they basically set up a protocol. Step 1. The dispute that started in Antioch gets officially brought to the leaders. Step 2, they hear testimony. Peter, Paul, and Barnabas get up and share these incredible eyewitness stories of what God was doing among the Gentiles. Step 3, James, the leader, connects all that testimony back to the Jewish scriptures. And then finally, step 4, after all that, they reach a consensus. And the result of this whole process was a decision, a landmark decision that would literally change the course of history. It's known as the Apostolic Decree. So, in the end, the council sided with Paul. The big decision was circumcision is not required for salvation. Huge. But as a way to build a bridge and maintain fellowship between the two groups, they did ask the Gentile believers to follow 4 specific rules. And these weren't just random, They were very specific prohibitions designed to help these new converts make a clean, public break from their old pagan ways of worship. You really can't overstate how monumental this ruling was. By getting rid of the barrier of Mosaic law, the Council of Jerusalem basically opened the floodgates. This single decision set Christianity on a path to become its own distinct world religion, one that was accessible to anyone, anywhere, no matter their background. And you can just feel the weight of authority in how they announced this. They didn't just say, "Hey, here's our opinion." No, their official letter said, "It has seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us." I mean, think about that. They truly believed that their very human process of arguing and debating and listening had led them to a divinely guided conclusion. But here's what's maybe even more important. The real legacy of this council isn't just about what they decided, it's about how they decided it. Because in solving their very first crisis, they kind of accidentally created a blueprint, a model for how to handle every crisis to come. And that was the precedent they set. A formal, repeatable way for leaders to come together and resolve critical disputes. It was like an operating system for church governance, a tool designed to keep unity when things threatened to fall apart, and it was a model they would use again and again and again. And you can actually watch this model grow and evolve over the next few centuries. It starts with this one single meeting around 50 AD. Then, by the mid-100s, you start seeing local councils pop up to handle regional issues. By the 200s, they're a regular, expected part of church governance. And it all leads up to this huge moment in 325 AD, the first ecumenical or worldwide council, a direct institutional descendant of that first small meeting in Jerusalem. So what we're seeing here is a massive scaling up of the solution that was first tested in Jerusalem. The prototype worked, right? The proof of concept was a success. So now it was time to take that model from a small, local meeting and turn it into an institution that could literally shape empires. And this comparison right here really just puts the scale of that change into perspective. It's incredible. In Jerusalem, you've got a handful of apostles and local elders talking about a pastoral issue, how to include new people. Fast forward less than 300 years to Nicaea, and you have over 300 bishops from all across the Roman Empire, and they were called together by the emperor himself. And they're not just talking about inclusion, they're debating the divine nature of Christ and writing a creed for the whole world. The model didn't just evolve, it scaled exponentially. And Nicaea? That was just the beginning. It was the first of what would become 7 great ecumenical councils. And together, all of these meetings, following that same basic blueprint from Jerusalem, would end up defining the core, foundational doctrines of Christianity for the next 1,500 years. Just amazing. So when you boil it all down, this whole council system was, in a way, a kind of social technology. It was a powerful tool designed for a very specific job, to create unity and doctrinal clarity, especially when division was threatening to tear everything apart. Which, of course, leaves us with one last, kind of provocative question, doesn't it? If this powerful tool was created specifically to unify the church, why is Christianity so divided today? It's definitely something to think about.